The impact of the Mongol Empire on world history is humongous. Without the largest contiguous land empire to have ever existed, Europe may not have seen the darkest days of disease and death. Firearms may not have arrived in Europe for a good 2 or 3 centuries more. And the Middle East and Turkey may not have learned new agricultural techniques and artistic motifs.
China may not have been united at all, and Russia could have been very different than how we know it today. Mongols believed they were gods among men when they rode their horses to conquer the world. But their hygiene practices may make you wonder, were they even civilized? Welcome to Nutty History, and today we're exploring Genghis Khan and his 100,000 riders' cleaning habits. This is what hygiene was like for the Mongol Empire. Washing clothes was a crime.
Now, most of Mongolia happens to share its landmass with the world's 6th largest desert, the Gobi Desert. In Mongolian, Gobi literally means arid, and the harsh conditions it offers shaped the nomadic lifestyle of nomadic Mongolians of the 13th and 14th centuries. Felt hats, long jackets with loose sleeves, and practical baggy trousers were worn by both men and women of the Asian steppe, as the Mongol army was a fast-moving, lightly armored cavalry.
There wasn't much difference between what they wore in their day-to-day lives and when they were fighting in their bloody battles. Only heavy cavalry soldiers would wear padded metal and hardened leather. Interestingly, Mongolian trends of that time haven't gone out of fashion for the nomadic people across Eurasia to this date. To counter the cold, dry, and windy weather that can last year-round with a short burst of summer that can get as hot as 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 Celsius, Mongolians wore warm and durable pieces of clothing, which were also layered to counter the temperature peaking in summer. Imagine this, Mongols were still nomadic people and hardly had any other possessions except the clothes on their bodies. They didn't carry backpacks or to change the clothes. They hardly changed their clothes and mostly wore the same set for years until they wore them out. Apart from having limited sets of clothes, another reason behind not changing clothes was that they were not allowed to wash their clothes. So that was one less excuse to change them. They used fleece and wool to make felt by beating it into sheets instead of weaving it. That's some beatdown. Felt was used for clothing, blankets, and yurt tents, which are still used today by Asian nomads. Goats were herded in large numbers and were the principal source of leather. Mongols also acquired furs of sable, squirrel, rabbit, fox, monkey, dog, goat, and wolf through hunting, trade, or tribute from the conquered states. Now, rare furs like snow leopard and lynx were considered a luxury and were used as diplomatic gifts among rulers. When Mongols took over China after the Song dynasty, they added silk to their fabric variety, but their clothing patterns, designs, and habits pretty much remained the same. Mongol women were responsible for making felt, leather, and clothes, and then repairing them. But one chore was never a part of their domestic duties: washing clothes.
Mongolia mostly offers an arid steppe environment with a scarcity of water, so it was not only practical, but it was also largely prohibited in their religious beliefs. Water wasn't just scarce, but also sacred for 13th and 14th century Mongols. They believed that flowing water was home to a dragon god among many other divine spirits. Disrespecting the dragon of the water and/or aquatic spirits could bring down their wrath on a person in the form of a dragon illness.
When Genghis Khan became the ruler of the Mongols and united them, he implemented these religious beliefs strongly. Foreign travelers like William of Roebuck mentioned how dirty the clothing of Mongols were and how they never washed them instead of embracing the filth on their clothing. These travelers were appalled to see Mongols rubbing their dirty, greasy hands all over their clothing after eating, like a toddler, instead of using a separate towel or napkin. And the best part, their moms probably encouraged them because, it wasn't a Mongol woman's job to wash clothes. Now, if anyone was caught washing their clothes in running water or dumping spoiled water in the water bodies, they would be executed according to the laws of Genghis Khan. As a result, the grease and the lard from their hands and mouth would begin layering up on their clothes. And though it must have stunk worse than 2 feet that haven't seen soap in a week, the multiple coatings of oil mixed with their body sweat would have helped them to stay warm and snuggly in the cold Gobi Desert. Okay, maybe not snuggly by our definition, but you get the point. William of Roebuck also wrote that the Mongols weren't just afraid of the dragon's illness, they were also scared of being smacked by their dragon god. William claims that the very Mongols who caused the entire world to tremble in horror and with the thunderous clop of their charging horses were also really scared of thunderstorms.
So the idea of their dragon god sending lightning from the sky to crisp them to death scared the living daylights out of them. William wrote that when storms appeared on the horizon, Mongols would push all the strangers out of their dwellings, wrap themselves in black felt, and hide in their beds until the storm would pass. I wonder if they also had a thundering song like John Bennett and Ted. You know, the Talking Bear movie.
How many lives could have been saved if the cities and states victims of Mongol oppression were aware of this little secret about the invaders and could fake lightning when Mongols sieged? Gargled showers. The rules for bathing for Mongols were not so different from washing or toilet practices. Do not disturb the flow of the water or prepare to die. While for the rest of the world, bathing has been much more than just a sanitation practice. For Mongols, it was a luxury, but in a different way. Mongols kept it simple by just making it an ultra-rare activity, while the rest of the world made it pleasurable by adding more to it, such as sauna, deep face wash, bubble baths, things like that.
Now in the modern world, we crave a clean canvas when it comes to skin, exfoliating dead skin, pollution, dirt, and grime, but the Mongols back in the day embraced it. They were scared of baths more than your cat, but unlike the cats, which are gods of their own domain, Mongols were avoiding baths for the dragon gods.
But they would bathe on special occasions and wash their hair too. To make water usable for washing themselves, they would fill their mouth with water, the same way someone does when they gargle. Then they would let it trickle down their hands, which they would collect and use to wet their head, face, and hair, and wash them. Interestingly, despite endorsing every sort of contamination on their skin, Mongols weren't shy of having a skincare regimen. To maintain the smoothness of their overall body, Mongol women applied a thick paste of fresh yogurt made of cow or goat milk to maintain good-looking skin. Another much more expensive and rich solution for skincare was sheeptail fat. Now you know science has proven that sheeptail fat has more collagen and offers more moisturization than modern skincare products. Mongolia has a very arid climate, so having the extra moisture really helped the Mongolian queens. Mongols also had a unisex fascination for braids to the point that every Mongol was expected to have one. Men braid their long hair behind their back and shave their sides, while women braid their hair sideways in two long braids that went over their shoulders. They equally decorated their braids with velvet fabric and wore silver and coral ornaments to make them bling. But as having two braids to men's one wasn't enough for women, they wore exquisite headgear to mark their territory about looking gorgeous.
Mongols also weaponized germs before anybody, including them learning of the microscopic organism's existence. They also knew how to separate the sick from the healthy to stop the infection from spreading. They knew how much being clean mattered to being healthy, but still embraced their dirt and grime.
Blood-sucking servants. During the year 1201 AD, northern Mongolia witnessed a battle along the Onon River that has now been pretty much forgotten or has been considered insignificant by historians. Now it's a footnote in the history of the mighty Mongol Empire that has yet to take shape. But if this battle had one little detail altered, the entire history of Asia and Europe would have been changed for centuries to come. Temujin, who would later be crowned as Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongol Empire, was fighting a confederation of nomads with his suzerain, Togrul Khan of Kerit. The leader of the nomad confederation, Jamuka, had challenged Togril's domination of central Mongolia. With Temujin on his side, Togrul made short work of Jamuka's rebellion, and as nomads split into various factions and began fleeing the battlefield, Togrul and Temujin tried to cut the snakes' heads to not let the rebels rise again. While Togrul chased the main perpetrator, Jamuka, Temujin was pursuing Achubat, an important leader of one of the factions called Tahichiyut that were part of the Confederation. Tahichiyut were hoping that the Onon River would keep them safe, but history has taught us how relentless Temujin, aka Genghis Khan, could be. Despite the barrier, Temujin led his forces towards the rebels and managed to cross the river. It wasn't as easy as we said. It took them an entire day to overcome the river. And more troubling news was that Temujin had taken an arrow in the neck and was losing a lot of blood. Temujin had kept fighting in spite of being wounded, but his attempts to stable the wound had failed. He was looking worse by the minute as the sun went down, and the two warring factions pitched their camps at an uneasy distance from each other. It may sound impractical in modern times, but the battles pausing at sunset only to resume back at dawn was normal for many centuries across the world. Soldiers would return to their camps to retire, and it was considered immoral to attack other camps at the dark hours, though it did happen on certain occasions.
Temujin's forces were in no mood to break the nightly truce on that particular day, as their leader was fighting for his life. The bleeding wasn't stopping, and though there were healers, one of Temujin's personal subordinates, Jelmi, was in no mood for trusting the healers alone with his master. He stayed all night with the future emperor and looked after him. Oh, and he also sucked the blood out of the wound and spat it on the ground. Talk about loyalty.
Miraculously, Temujin did wake up the next morning. Thanks to Jilmi's efforts to suck the blood out of the wound, he prevented clotting and a possible embolism that could have been fateful for not just Temujin but the entire Mongol Empire. Temujin was feeling weak and dehydrated and asked for a drink. When Jilmi returned with water and kumiz, a drink made with fermented mare's milk and alcohol, he found Temujin was furious and exasperated. The Mongol warlord was really unhappy to see the dried up blood around his bed, and he chastised his royal servant for not spitting it further away. But Genghis Khan did recognize the effort of his subordinate and brought back the age-old exercise of blood-sucking to the war medication of the Mongols. According to the book, The Secret History of Mongols, historian Rashid al-Din recorded Genghis Khan saying that Jilmi brought back the spark of life that had abandoned his body, and without his loyal servant, he may not have been able to stand on his feet ever again. During the golden age of the Horde, it was a common practice among the Mongol warlords and generals to have retainers and servants to suck the blood out of arrow wounds. The world is a washroom.
For 5,000 years, rural Mongolians have lived in girs, or yurts, which are round, pointy shelters covered in white wool felt. Imagine a miniature circus tent made out of white wool. Lots of them, and you'd have girs. Girs were perfect for the nomadic lifestyle because they could be assembled within 3 hours and they could be broken down just as fast.
It's pretty obvious that tents like those had no room for washrooms, but Mongols never felt the need for them in any sense whatsoever. They didn't wash much of anything when it comes to that, to be honest. Yeah, it's quite nutty that we are having a hygiene video about an empire that never cared for hygiene at all. This video could even be titled Mongols Had No Hygiene at All, or Life with the Funky Mongols. Their hands were always oily and greasy. They never washed them, they only wiped them on their own clothing, as we said earlier. But it goes beyond that. Mongols seldom washed themselves much, not even for special occasions, but also didn't mind going to the washroom anywhere. In fact, unlike the rest of the modern world, where people with no washroom in sight would seek a nature's enclosure, a bush to take care of their business, Mongols didn't find defecating in the open a matter of shame. There was no poop shaming with the Mongols. One might have dinner with them after a ceremony, and all of a sudden this Khan may pull his trouser down not even 20 feet from their dinner table and do the deed. If William of Roebuck is to be believed, he was an eyewitness to this norm in Mongolian culture. It was normal for Mongols to just dig a hole in the earth and empty their bowels in it. But they were not allowed to use water for it because of the fear of the water-dragging god.
Ironically, while taking a dump near their dinner table was fine, spitting food was a major offense. Mongols believed that choking on food was a result of a demon interfering, and if an individual choked on a piece of food and spit it out, the offense was twofold. Not only did the person waste food, but he also polluted the dwelling where he ate.
They were also prohibited from urinating in water, and the punishment of getting caught was losing their head on their shoulders. In fact, even if someone was falsely accused of peeing in water, they would end up headless if they couldn't prove otherwise. In the event of an accidental urination, Mongols were heavily fined, and the payment was to clean the offended party's home and possessions. But until that cleansing took place, no one dared to enter the dwelling or take anything from it. Treating gout, REVENANT style. Though lamb and horse meat was a popular source of food among Mongols, they were happy to eat anything they could find along the way, from an ox to a fox. There's often a misconception that Mongols ate their meat raw, but that was only true for extremely desperate times. Mongols prefer to boil their meat to the point that it would get all swirly and goopy in the water. Apart from this meat soup, they really enjoyed sausages made from blood.
Even though they had horrible tasting food, the Mongols loved to eat, and especially after their empire inflated like a pregnant pig. They got settled all over from the Caspian Sea to the China Sea and got lazy and were gluttons. Because of that, gout became prevalent in the Mongol hordes. Kublai Khan suffered from gout most of his life. The 14th century traveler Ibn Battuta witnessed the Mongols' way of treating gout in the Middle Ages firsthand while visiting the family of the Sultan of the Golden Horde.
It was no extensive application of medicine or excruciating treatment such as leeches, but just a gross spectacle. They would stick the gout-infected limb inside the carcass of a dead animal, preferably a horse or an ox. For some reason, if that wouldn't prove effective, because, well, why would it in the first place? Tell us in the comments, which other interesting periods of history shall we cover in our hygiene series? Again, thanks for watching Nutty History, and do not forget to like and share if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more similar content.